Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we hope you have a great 2020. We have some great guests and some important topics. How about this? Tough on crime, games of skill. But first, State Senator Scott Martin joins me. We're going to look back at 2019, and you can't do a show about the new year with looking ahead to 2020. As they say, let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome back. Well, sitting across from me is State Senator Scott Martin. He represents a district in Lancaster County, the 13th senatorial district, if I got that correct.
Yes, sir.
And he also serves on the local government committee of the State House of Representatives. Anything that has to do with your local government, rules, regulations, and laws, he probably had something to say about it. Senator, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Terry. It's great to see you again.
All right, let's go back and take a look very quickly at 2019. What was, you think, the most important aspect of it in terms of the laws passed? 100. The governor put his signature on 100 laws. I couldn't believe that. Jan Murphy in Penn Live wrote a piece about it. 100 signatures. So it's not like you all weren't doing anything, right?
No, it was a very busy session, and there was a lot that got accomplished that had ramifications on many important things. And I'll probably start off by talking about the fact that with one of the biggest topics that's dominated the media was the statute of limitations reform. I know it was contentious over the period of time as the House, the Senate were wrestling between what the versions were going to be. And I think we reached a point where we felt we've reached a constitutionally sound decision in the bills that we put forth. And not only that, as opposed to what happened last session, all 4 grand jury recommendations were addressed in the bills that were passed.
Give us a couple of the highlights.
Well, first and foremost, to do the 2-year retroactive window, that will be a constitutional amendment that has to pass in 2 consecutive sessions identically, and then it's going to go to the voters of Pennsylvania. And as you recall, that was a huge battle point. Some folks wanted to do it just statutorily, and there was many hearings talking about, is this constitutional or not constitutional?
So the point about this is to expand the time in which somebody who was alleging sexual abuse can file a legal complaint, take it.
Absolutely, and there was people who were aged out of being able to file any kind of suit.
I mean, they passed the age that's currently in the law, and they couldn't file a suit.
Correct. So now, if this would pass the constitutional test, the second vote, and then also the voter referendum, folks would have a 2-year window to file suit. What it also did, and which was a big problem point, was it's treating public institutions and private entities the same.
Same way.
And the prior bills did not.
All right. One of the other aspects of it is that new voting systems come this primary, April 28. You're going to be able to get an absentee ballot. Right now, if you want an absentee ballot, what do you have to do?
Oh, you have an absentee ballot. You have strict guidelines as to when you could do it, or even to register to vote. And now you're basically cutting that 30-day window down to 15 days in order to register to vote. Of course, the big ticket item that was part of that election reform package was the money to pay for the new voting machines after the governor had decertified a lot of the machines across Pennsylvania. And of course, the other big component was straight party voting will no longer be part of the elections process.
And that was pretty controversial with the Democrats obviously not favoring it. They made some arguments about it adds complexity to it, and if people want to vote one party, Democrat or Republican, they ought to have the ability to do that. And Governor Wolf wasn't wild about it he actually opposed it, but then I presume the compromises that were worked out made that possible.
Absolutely, and there was only a handful of states that still allowed straight party voting, and we were one of them, no longer. People can still vote straight party. That's the thing. And I think we got to give voters the credit they deserve.
You mean they have to check each office instead of put one box, check one box.
And, and I hear the feedback I've gotten, at least in the 13th district, is people were good with that.
Yeah. There's another aspect of this, and that has to do with voting machines. The Election Commission said we need new voting machines. They need what's called a verifiable paper trail. Yeah. So as you and I chat right now, in all 67 counties, I didn't think it could be done that quickly, they have adopted they have adopted new voting machines or purchased them, made some contract with a vendor, correct?
Yeah, and the thing we need to be careful about, and hopefully moving forward, is that we just don't single-handedly paint all of Pennsylvania with one brush and have to incur this kind of cost in the future. You know, in our home county, in Lancaster County, 90% of the people voted on the paper ballot to do the e-scan machines. There was nothing wrong with them. Yeah. I heard a lot of talk about hacking of elections machines. Well, in Pennsylvania, there are no election machines that were tied into the internet to be hacked. So hopefully there's a process put in place that the governor's working closely with local county election officials to understand the actions that he's taking and the cost ramifications.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, I want to talk about tobacco products, a change in the law, when you can purchase them. We'll get to that. And the other thing is, I want you to bring out the crystal ball. Here we go, 2020, an election year, right? Yeah. Something actually important will happen, and we'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, I'm talking with Senator Scott Markey. He represents the 13th District. He's a Republican from Lancaster County. We did a little bit about 2019, and before we move on to 2020, I have one other important topic. All right, if you smoke, if you use tobacco products, 18, but no longer, take it.
It's now up to 21, and ironically, the federal government just also did the same exact thing.
Right.
So if individuals want to vape, if individuals also want to use tobacco products in the state of Pennsylvania, you have to be 21 in order to purchase them.
Right. I'll tell you what's a little scary. I mean, smoking, we know, and vaping, we know that there are serious health considerations involved. And I think basically, well, you may not want the government to overregulate, but obviously people are going to smoke at a younger age, but it's simply bad for their health. And again, I'm not being critical. I know that, people in my family smoked. My mom did. I mean, and it's just something that's got to be attended to in a very serious way.
Yeah, and I think hopefully this will lend to trying to keep it out of the hands of younger folks, because that's where a lot of people get started. Yep. But also on the vaping side of things, I was really distraught to find out, and I had kids in my son's elementary school catching kids vaping in the bathroom. It's like you're only in 5th grade, and that's hopefully some of the things we're looking to prevent.
Yeah. All right, looking ahead, 13 states have now made recreational marijuana legal. Illinois is the last state. I think it's 13. The governor and the lieutenant governor strongly support it. Mm-hmm. You folks in the legislature, the Republicans in the legislature, you control both houses, have not shown any interest. And I'm going to raise this, I'll ask a question. Is the state legislature in Pennsylvania in 2020 likely to pass a bill legalizing recreational marijuana?
I would say the answer is no.
Yeah.
The promises of tax revenue that are materialized, people can look at the stats, specifically California, they never materialize. We're so close to also on the heels of medical. I have a huge concern about youth utilization, and so for years these kids have been hearing talk about the health benefits of marijuana, and now we want to just go ahead and open the floodgates for recreational use. And there's clear statistical information showing that in the states that have legalized recreational marijuana, that youth utilization has increased, that driving under the influence has increased, cases of domestic violence have increased. Right. So there needs to be a long line. And if Pennsylvania were to ever seriously look at this, you have to be able to answer the questions. For the people who operate forklifts or drive tractor trailers, the people teaching our kids, do we have a full understanding of, what's the appropriate level of THC in someone's bloodstream? Sure. So I don't see it happening. It's not being discussed in our caucus, so we'll see where that conversation goes.
Yeah, we're trying to work out the schedule to get dates to get Lieutenant Governor Fetterman and Governor Wolf on the program, talk about this and some other things. All right, let's go. Here we are. We're in a big election year. Typically, the legislature is not one of the most productive years when you are. Half of the Senate and every member of the House is up for re-election. So what are you looking? What are your agenda items for 2020?
Well, first and foremost, the number one responsibility we have is the budget. So seeing where this economy is lending revenues and coming in, we finally got out of the hole with last year's budget.
Right.
I mean, my first couple of years in the state Senate, we were starting off with
and revenues are up over the projections.
Yes, which is great. But I still think we still have a lot of work to do, especially in the area of education. When you look at, forever we've been talking about the importance of trade jobs and skill jobs and career and technical education. And finally last year was the first time we finally put our money where our mouth was. Institutions like Thaddeus Stevens, 41% increase in funding over the last couple of years. And why is that important? They have thousands of employers coming to them saying, we need this type of skill. Yeah. And yet we only could take so many students. Okay. And so we're going to continue to focus on that and really, we're hopefully pointing children to the opportunities for career-sustaining jobs.
And that's one of the areas that the Republicans and Governor Wolf have generally agreed on, because education has been his top priority when I'm talking about the public schools.
Oh, absolutely. And we're at historic levels of funding for public schools, and also for schools that participate in programs like EITC. Those numbers are up dramatically.
All right, I'm going to let you go. Coming up, we have some folks from the caucus, and as I promoted, we've got Tough on Crime. I want to get into this games of skill. What does that all mean? And we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
All right, we have the folks from the caucus here. It's a watchdog publication for state and local government, and joining me is Gillian McGoldrick. She is a state and federal government reporter for LNP Media, and the bureau chief of the caucus, Brad Bumsted. Brad's a frequent reporter. You're a reporter, that's right. You've been a reporter for a long time. Frequent guest on the program. We'd love to have you. All right, let's talk about a couple of important things. Let's start off with tough on crime. Sentencing for people who are drug dealers and nonviolent crimes. So what's going on with that?
Well, we've seen a real trend, and it's going 180 degrees. If you'll remember back in January 1995, when former Republican Governor Tom Ridge took office, he was elected on an anti-crime agenda. He holds a special session on crime. Right. The legislature passes at least 30 bills to get tough on crime. And that was really the direction of things. And it's come full circle now with not just in Pennsylvania, but nationally, but in Pennsylvania with Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner, John Fetterman, the Lieutenant Governor, all pushing for either, making it easier to get pardons in certain circumstances, or shorter sentences, for drug-related. Right. And it's just, I've never seen anything quite so dramatic. The question is, had they gone too far in 1995, and has it gone too far in the other direction now?
I guess the question is, if you get young people who get picked up for a couple of joints of pot, whether their whole lives should be ruined for that kind of a mistake. I'm not talking about drug dealing. So is there any effort to differentiate between that? I mean, are they talking about drug dealers that would
No, I
get?
don't think high-level drug dealers, are going to get the same kind of treatment. It is oriented towards the light user, if you will.
Right.
But the whole scope of it is that, if you look at it, you've got conservatives who would never back this behind it because it's reducing the cost of corrections enormously. I mean, there's just, we built so many prisons back in the 90s and early 2000s, just one prison after another, and, kept enacting mandatory sentences.
Right.
And now they're trying to pull back from that.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a balance somewhere.
Any comment before we go on to yours? You said he covered it all?
He covered it all.
All right. I have no clue. I have a little clue about this subject since I don't do, gaming is out of my...
We'll take you out on it.
Gaming is right now, I won't say in the past, but is out of my portfolio. So what is important and why should our viewers care about something that you call games of skill? I have no clue go ahead, take it.
Yeah, if you've been into a Sunoco gas station or a bar, you may have seen these machines that look a lot like slot machines, but they're not. They have a certain level of skill, which means that they can not be regulated by government. So they, in 2014,
I get
yeah.
If it's a game of skill, it's not regulated.
It's not a game of chance.
But they're actually both, in my opinion. They're games of skill. There is some skill to it, but there is also some luck to it. So.
And you win money at the end of the day in both. Do I got that right?
Yes, but if you master the skill, you should be able to win more money than a game of chance.
Oh, I get it. So what's the point? What's the legislature going to do about this? Or what have they done about it?
To backtrack, the skill is, when you play a slot machine, you press the button and it'll go through really quick, and 3 in a row is how you win. But in a game of skill, and specifically the Pennsylvania skill game, which is the one that's working its way through the court system right now, and also the legislature is trying to figure out how to deal with.
So the issue is whether the government should regulate it. Is that the issue before the court?
And because there is a level of skill, the skill being that instead when you press the button to scramble all of the symbols, it'll become you have to choose the 3rd in a row. So that's the level of skill.
So now when you go into 7-Eleven or whatever, Turkey Hill or whatever, right, go ahead.
Well, the Pace-O-Matic people who make these particular machines say they don't have a predetermined outcome in their software, that there's not going to be so many winners versus losers like there are slot machines in a casino. But the heck of it is there are probably, by one estimate, 50,000 machines out there, not Pace-O-Matics, but theirs and a bunch of other skills.
Only 50,000.
Yeah, an estimated 50,000. But the issue is those are not being taxed. The state's not getting any money from those. Okay. The Department of Aging says it's losing $195 million for senior programs that would be coming in.
There you go.
Right? So that's why you should care about it.
We'll monitor this. All right, guess what? We're going to run to a break, but the most disliked tax in the state is on the draw. We talk a little bit about property tax reductions. I won't even get into property tax elimination. Let's just talk about reductions, and we'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
All right, I'm chatting with two folks from the Caucus, Brad Bumsted and Gillian McGoldrick, and we're chatting about a variety of things. Now we're going to turn to Brad Bumsted, the topic that, it comes up and comes up and comes up. It's the most disliked tax in the state. It's the property tax. As you know, you've been covering this for a long time. Options are, can we reduce the property tax, by state law in some way, or can we eliminate it? Some folks would like to eliminate it. It's 13 or 14 billion.
15.
Now it's $15 billion. Take it.
Well, this goes back, efforts to try to deal with this go back to when Dick Thornburg was governor, and he had the Seiert Commission, if you'll remember.
1978 he was elected.
And, and after that, former Governor Casey had a major effort to try to, pass tax reform. Basically, barely got it through the Senate and onto the ballot, and it was defeated 3-1 by the state's voters for a variety of reasons. Some would say it was demagogued, but whatever, it was complicated and difficult to understand. So now people are still trying. Senator David Argyle headed a working group of Senate and House members who are trying to come up with proposals that might be considered this session. And the problem with those is that elimination is not part of it. So you have a certain faction who don't want to back that because, another reduction like we got through gaming may not be all that significant.
Well, local school board members like the property tax largely because they control it. And when we have a downturn in the economy where the sales tax and the income tax, the two big statewide taxes, the revenues fall off because of a recession or a bad economy, but the property tax remains stable.
It's a stable tax, yeah.
Yeah. And what are you hearing about it? Anything?
I attended a property tax elimination seminar out in Berks County a couple months ago, where a lot of lawmakers promised again that this is the year that they're going to eliminate the property tax, and outlined all of the reasons why they were going to do it. But
you'd have to have such a big hike in the sales and income tax that becomes untenable. I mean, you're just
right. I mean, it's so much so that if you remember that Representative Frank Ryan even included a retirement tax as part of it to try to reach the $15 billion. But Terry, here's the bigger picture, and that is that in an election year when we have a presidential election, it's going to be hotly contested, may be relevant in this state when the primary comes around, half of the Senate, all of the House members, a lot of issues are just going to fall to the wayside as politics takes over.
We have about a minute left, but here's the deal. The Senate has hiked the minimum wage. Governor Wolf wanted $12 an hour. For this summer, $15 an hour. Ultimately, I think it was 2023 or 4. Now there's a proposal passed the Senate, bipartisan. It's in the House. It raises it to $9.50 an hour, I think. Is it going anywhere?
Over 3 years or something.
Over 3. Is it going anywhere?
2 years, yeah.
2 years. Is it going anywhere?
I don't believe so.
I don't believe the Republicans not likely to hike it?
No. I mean, small business continues to oppose that. The Senate Democrats, the House Democrats say that's a disgrace that we have such a low minimum wage in Pennsylvania compared to surrounding states. But I don't see it happening this year in particular in an election year.
Well, as you know, I mean, as I talked to the senator about, in an election year, it's not exactly the most productive. Every member of the state House has to stand for re-election, half the Senate.
Yeah.
Yes, no?
Yeah, I mean, Senator Martin is one of those who will be up for re-election this year, plus all of the House. So they will switch gears from passing or having 100 laws signed this year by the governor.
Yeah.
It will probably
So you think it'll be a little lower, right?
A little bit, Terry.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for coming in. Great update. We'll look ahead. We've got a lot to talk about in 2020. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.